For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
My guest today is Mel K, the author and podcast host who's written a new book called Infiltration Instead of Invasion. And if you haven't seen President John F. Kennedy's speech to the press from April 1961, this is what Mel is talking about. Mel, welcome to the show. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you for having me, Jason. If anyone knows what's going on with the infiltration instead of invasion, subversion instead of elections, it's you.
I've been a victim of it myself. It's a wonderful title for the book, and I want to make sure people know they can buy it now on Shopify, on Amazon. It's all over the place. And Mel, I've been so impressed by the work that you've done, appearances on Jimmy Dore and basically everywhere. People haven't seen you. I don't know where they've been. But first thing I want to ask you is, the title is obvious perhaps, but I think in 1961, when JFK gave that speech, which many people think was the precursor to his assassination, it might have been presumed that he was talking about communism, post-McCarthy era. What do you think he was talking about, and why did you choose that as the title of your book?
Well, this will be one of a series of four. Really, I was going around the country during the lockdowns, kind of, open America, this is unconstitutional, all of that, and watching the coordination around the world of what was happening to not just our country, but all countries. And I started thinking, I don't think JFK was talking about communism in 1961 when he wrote that. First of all, it was a speech to the press, which should tell everyone that the press has for a very long time not been on the side of the people, transparency or truth. But second and more important is that I wanted to understand what he was talking about, because to me, he was talking about America, not about communism somewhere. And then also I started digging into it and I realized what he is also saying is something that I believe was echoed by Eisenhower on his way out of office when he warned about the military-industrial complex and the international banks. And then Truman himself on his deathbed also warned and said that he never would have signed a 1947 National Security Act that created the CIA and NSA and the rest of it if he had known that they would have covertly taken over foreign policy. So I started there and worked backwards. And what I found was during this period of time, 1944 to 1954, largely in Switzerland, which we were all told was neutral, the Dulles brothers, two Wall Street lawyers, a banker, McKittrick, also from Wall Street, and bankers from all over the world were convening with the Nazi banks in the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, creating a supranational architecture and then giving that architecture not only immunity, but also giving it power to run continuity above nations, not just past the time that the men that created it, but forever. And I frankly believe that architecture is what is still keeping the United States of America from being the sovereign constitutional republic that we were promised long ago. And that's where I tie it to, is those 10 years.
I agree with you. I mean, I presumed that's what you were talking about. It's so, listening to that, have you ever seen that JFK speech before, the video?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when I was touring, I was going around with RFK Jr. and then a whole bunch of other people talking about how unconstitutional what was happening during the entire lockdowns. And RFK Jr. had spoken in front of me in the Times Square event. and he talked about the CIA and what happened to his family. And then that speech just rang in my head. And every time I'd go somewhere and speak, I'd do what you just played in the beginning and say, we need to start looking at what JFK was talking about exactly within. Because if by 1961, he's saying that we have already been infiltrated, our elections have been subverted, intimidation took over essentially the whole promise of America. What did he see that we were not shown? And that's kind of where I started, was that speech, and I worked backwards.
And it seems like it's only gotten worse. There might have been a moment, I think, maybe 10 years ago where people were breaking through on social media. But, 2020, the whole suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop on Twitter, the whole everything that came out about the revelations of the FBI infiltrating Twitter, kicking people off. But it seems like everyone is back on Twitter. I've been reinstated. You're on Twitter. I presume you were taken off of social media.
Yeah. No, the Mel K show is still banned from Twitter and YouTube.
Wow. Wow. But
Yeah.
you do have your own Twitter account, right? Why? How
Yeah,
come
I
you couldn't
restarted
get it
it.
back? Wow.
No, the Mel K show, if you look at it, it's still suspended, but I didn't get it back, but I started over and was allowed to.
Oh my
Some,
gosh. See, that's
yeah.
unbelievable. And Elon Musk tells us, hey, it's free speech. You should be able to. It's just outrageous to me. I mean, this happened to me as well. I got kicked off. I sued Twitter. I went to Twitter and got strangled trying to tell Elon Musk that the FBI had infiltrated. So are we any better today, do you think? Or is this just a new form of subversion?
Well, I think we're shining a light on it, but I think you and I have been in the forefront with very few other people identifying the lawfare is really coming from NGOs and international funding to subvert the nation. And I firmly believe that we have multiple operations on the ground in America to distract the American people from the real consequence here, which is, I believe, to end the constitutional republic. So what I see going on from everything I'm looking at is after they built the architecture and then gave themselves immunity. I don't know if your audience knows this, but the International Organization Immunity Act of 1945, written by lawyers from Wall Street, essentially gave the Bank of International Settlements and later the IMF and the World Bank and 63 other banks total and complete immunity from audit, investigation, any legal action. For whatever reason, that is still in place to this day. And that is even on our soil. So the IMF and World Bank, as you know, there's many others, are in Washington, D.C. But the United States of America, our government, our DOJ, FBI has zero jurisdiction over these international organizations on our soil. Then they add in the United Nations and 75 tentacles of the United Nations, including the World Health Organization, the UNESCO. They all also have immunity from this 1945 act that the president could rescind tomorrow, but he's not doing that. And we have to question why. I do believe that the architecture above nations took a whole new turn. And this is where the problem lies. But seeing that Marco Rubio went after USAID, which is not aid, it's international development, comes out of that same period of time of protecting the supranational architecture. But going after USAID first was a real sign that they see what I see, which is essentially when the Dulles brothers walked into the two highest unelected positions in the United States of America, the head Secretary of State and the head of the CIA, I believe that they brought back what they built in Switzerland, the supranational architecture. And essentially from that point on, the State Department ceased to work for the United States of America. I firmly believe the State Department, CIA, all of the tentacles of the Five Eyes, National Endowment for Democracy and USAID later have all been tentacles of the international banking cartel since the 50s. And all of the regime change operations, starting with Ajax in 53 and then Guatemala in 54, both clients of Sullivan and Cromwell, that we were told we were saving some kind of democracy. It really looks like this is lawfare from the beginning. And 80 countries since. And in 2016, Donald Trump dared to win the election. The people voted for something different than that post-World War II order. And essentially, they turned the entire playbook they have used since the 50s for regime change operations around the world on the United States. And we have been in a color revolution, a regime change operation, and an endless seditious conspiracy since, I believe, before the 2016 election, but certainly is continuing. And those people stay out there. But the eliminating of USAID as a dark budget, pushing this along, has made a big difference, I believe. And I see them going after the financial tentacles, which have always been essentially, if you look at the Dulles brothers' background, John Foster Dulles walked into the State Department as a board member of the Rockefeller Institute. Also, John Foster Dulles wrote and helped write the UN treaty. So these guys walked in already prepared, I believe, to collapse the constitutional republic for a straight democracy, the majority rules democracy that they want, to push the country into global governance with Agenda 21 and then later Agenda 2030. Obama signed us on in 2015, and it was unacceptable when Donald Trump won in 2016 because they had already decided our future above our country, and it had been decided all the way back, I believe, by the end of World War II.
Yeah, and I really enjoy that aspect of what you've been talking about. You're shining a light on things like Operation Paperclip. And frankly, I heard you say something, I think it was to Jimmy Dore the other day, that Operation Paperclip is essentially just the tip of the iceberg. And
Yeah.
it's usually the way it goes. Like if we've heard about it and it's, it's declassified, it's like, okay, yeah, that's the limited hangout where they're trying to tell you the most digestible part of it. We need to talk about that. But I want to stay on Trump for a minute because I voted for Trump. I still support Trump. I hope he will succeed because all these people who are, I mean, look, he's doing a lot of things that aren't excellent, but it's like when you're on the bus and somebody starts fighting with the bus driver, that's not going to help us. Let the guy drive. But I want to ask you about a recent appointment. We had Bill Pulte as the interim, director of national intelligence. And now we've got Jay Clayton coming in there. You rightly mentioned Sullivan and Cromwell. This guy is an attorney straight out of there, and it's the CIA law firm. What do we think about the head of the director of national intelligence being a Sullivan and Cromwell attorney?
Well, I was taken back, obviously, by it. Also, you and I both have been very, are focused on the Southern District of New York and their unbelievable level of corruption that they have exercised since Cy Vance and then Comey and this guy. The one thing I see, though, happening is some of these people, because this is the same thing you can say about Scott Besson and George Soros. So some of these people are insiders inside the architecture of which I am talking about. They know full well about the protections of the CIA and what they've been doing around the world. Rubio with the 75 countries with the visa pause for training at our embassies says to me that he's full well knows that our embassies have essentially been CIA operations since the 50s as well. And all I can hope is that the knowledge that these two men have of the infiltration and subversion of our country is used for good, because all of this is about the apparatuses can be used for good or evil. We have been subjected, I believe, since at least 2015, but certainly well before that, to an endless barrage of what I call, Hannah Arendt actually called it, tyranny by bureaucracy. So we have a situation in America built by design, I believe, in those 10 years by the same people I'm talking about. Also, there's other people the American people don't know about, like McCloy, who was the guy that went into Germany after supposedly the Allies won to denazify Germany, and that is not what happened at all. And what I feel about all of this is that maybe these people who are insiders and can get to the core of how this happened to our country, that we were so subverted, can unravel the mess that we're in. I do not know. I'm unfortunately, what it seems to me is that a lot of people are waiting out Donald Trump and sabotaging him coming up in the midterms because either they don't understand what he is actually trying to do to dismantle this supranational, capture of the United States, or they are in on it. I'm not sure which one yet, but to talk about the midterms and Donald Trump at this point from those gigantic platforms that are obviously propped up and ignoring the fact that the constitutional republic is the target is disturbing. And when it comes to Jay Clayton and some of these people in the lawfare world, I mean, they know that the hubs of Agenda 2030 and the collapse of the constitutional republic are the Center for American Progress and Brookings and Atlantic Council and, of course, Council Foreign Relations. So if we know that, and Clayton and Scott Bessent know that, and they were on the other side of the creation. I'm just hoping and I'm praying, and I have a lot of faith in God right now with what's happening, that this is a dismantling of that architecture. But first, the American people have to understand we were purposely miseducated about World War II and the aftermath of World War II on purpose. And it has to start at the NGOs. So what I am hoping is that Clayton and Bessent and these people are going after the money, the supranational money. And the first thing I would really like the American people to do is to learn about this International Organization Immunity Act and demand that Donald Trump rescind it. So that maybe we can start to realize and understand how much the American people have been lied to, looted, manipulated into supporting wars, which I believe are endless wars for profit. It is the model. And the model essentially is to consolidate power and money above nations after every war in the Reconstruction, which was a total fraud on the American people after World War II. And from my trajectory of what I can see, particularly about John Podesta's trajectory in the Democratic Party and aligned with Soros since 2003, is that is the node that must be handled, is regardless of everything else. If we do not dismantle this group inside our country that actually is, I believe their hub is at Harvard at the Balfour Center at this D3P project that's going on there and has been since 2016 when Trump won. To me, that architecture must be dismantled and those people held accountable, or we are not a sovereign nation that is going to thrive. We are going to be fighting within while people don't even notice it and are pointing at Trump and really not at the people that are undermining the republic. That
Yeah.
is exactly the hub, in my opinion, that digital, defending digital democracy. Because I'll tell you something, I don't know if your audience knows this yet. John Podesta was the head of, first of all, Ban Ki-moon pulled in John Podesta to help write Agenda 2030, which is a nation state ending plan, explicitly a nation state ending plan for global governance. But most people know that that has been Rockefeller's plan since the 1900s. But the bigger picture is that John Podesta was working a lot at the Center for American Progress, along with Brookings, which is where Norm Eisen's hub is during this whole last 10 years, with the Chinese Communist Party, going to China to do joint ventures with the Center for American Progress in China. Well, just before the 2016 election, and he's the head of the Hillary Clinton campaign, he goes over to China and right before the election. And then Trump wins, and that same group that went right before the election while being the head of Center for American Progress and the head of the Hillary Clinton campaign goes back to China. And then you see all this money pouring into Harvard, into this program. And again, we can't look at China's growth to replace us in a vacuum and pointing at China. No, no, no. This was done by the same NGOs. Rockefeller, Ford, and Carnegie had been doing the same thing in China, not just from the 1900s on, but straight through Mao's revolution. They weren't bothered by Mao's revolution. They were continuing to embed there, just like they weren't bothered by Hitler. They continue to embed there. So to me, it's not that hard to identify those that are treasonous and seditious in this nation right now. The hard part is getting the American people to realize that they have been deceived, that we are each other's enemies by design, and that this socialist democrat movement is not new. It is just the rising up of this long-term plan to collapse the republic. And when these people are talking about, and Hillary Clinton supporting them, we have to remember Hillary Clinton is a progressive from the beginning. She wrote her thesis about Saul Alinsky, for God's sakes. And again, you brought up the FBI. Well, they sabotaged all these students for, what was that? The Students for Democracy,
Democratic
the Weather
Society.
Underground.
Yeah.
Right. So the whole Weather Underground essentially went into academia. And Bezmenov in the 80s said to G. Edward Griffin, when he was warning America that we were infiltrated, that all they had to do was get from kindergarten to college one generation of United States children in the education system to turn their backs against America, to demoralize, to dehumanize our founders and everything. And that actually happened. So that is where we are right now. And most people don't understand this is an ongoing operation. A lot of roads lead to Obama, but really, Obama to me is a Manchurian candidate. And the American people were never told about Obama's history, not his mother, not his father coming on the Kennedy airlift like Mamdani's dad did, not USAID, not the second father, Soturo, at a regime change operation in Indonesia where his mom and him were. You know, there's just so much embedded, but it's a small group and they just keep getting away with it. And the biggest issue, and I think you know this too, is if everyone's guilty, nobody's guilty. So all these hearings about the FBI and the CIA and the NSA and doesn't matter if nobody's held accountable. The architecture is meant to sustain regardless of who the president is. So if we don't dismantle the nodes within America and hold them accountable, then this will continue and we will be forced into Agenda 2030 because let me tell you, the architecture is built and it's not just China. It is the globalist operation that meets at Davos, the BlackRocks of the world, the big tech bros that have no boundaries, no borders. Well, no borders in cyberspace has not been defined, and we have to really start talking about the global public infrastructure that was built, to take a phrase, in warp speed under the Autopen presidency. They just need to flip a switch, and we are China. And anyone right now that is not concentrating on the collapse of the Constitution and the constitutional republic, and especially constitutional law, because since the 90s, especially when the 27-year-old law student at Harvard had a strike, that's Obama at Harvard Law School, demanding that they have DEI and critical legal theory dominate law school at Harvard, and then it spread through all the Ivy League law schools. That's not constitutional law, what these guys are doing, what Norm Eisen was doing in Prague, connecting international law in 2012 and 2013. Trump winning, they invested trillions of dollars into global governance and collapsing the constitutional republic for straight democracy. And the American people have no idea what they're fighting. And that's the hardest part to watch is, and why I wrote this is to say this architecture is still functioning above our nation and it must be dismantled. And I think Trump is trying to dismantle it, not just the USAID, but people have to understand the CIA operations, which are global. I don't believe the CIA was created to protect the United States of America, nor were the Five Eyes about protecting their countries. I think the CIA and the Five Eyes was created 44 to 54 to protect the international supranational architecture of the international banking system and endless war for profit model. So that is where the American people have been miseducated by design to not understand that that is what is happening and it is unconstitutional and needs to be dismantled.
There's so much that you and I could talk for hours and hours, Mel. We've got to go back World War II. I mean, we had a taste of unconstitutional America with the Disinformation Governance Board and everybody getting kicked off of social media. And so you brought up the Weather Underground, the Students for a Democratic Society, Bernadine Dorn and Bill Ayers. A lot of people have not ever seen this New York Times article. We've got the 25th anniversary of September 11th coming up. This was published Tuesday, September 11th, 2001 in the New York Times, and it's Bill Ayers talking about he has no regret for a love of explosives. He says, "I don't regret setting bombs," Bill Ayers said. "I feel we didn't do enough." I mean, is this a coincidence, or are we seeing the hidden hand of some powerful, as you said, supra or supranational organization that is behind World War I, World War II, September 11th, the JFK assassination, even the Charlie Kirk assassination? I think a lot of people have been very confused. Charlie Kirk was not a president. He was not a senator. He could have been, certainly, but it seems like his assassination has had a similar polarizing effect where, before I saw pictures of people like just as an example, Candace Owens and Laura Loomer dancing together at a party. Now they're arguing about whose husband is more gay, and it's just a fracture in a formerly unified organization. Isn't this what they want, is fighting? They want Jews
Yes.
versus Muslim, black versus white. Everything is just a polarize, personalize, and turn everybody against each other in the streets.
Yeah, that is exactly what it is. And it's the same model they've used since Operation Ajax in 1953. And they honed it and honed it and honed it. And don't forget, also, a lot of people don't put together the Clintons and Soros from before he was president, and that in 2003, well, actually 1993, George Soros, Reagan and Gorbachev negotiated to end NATO, essentially. It didn't get written in paper, but in 1993, George Soros wrote a document that's still on Open Society, and it's called NATO World Order. And shortly after that, as you know, Bill Clinton expanded NATO against the promises made by Reagan and Baker and bombed Yugoslavia, to save democracy or something. And during that bombing, they supposedly accidentally hit the Chinese embassy. And Clinton, after that, then offers China as a apology for hitting their embassy in Yugoslavia. He offers them entry into the World Trade Organization. And the next, 50 years is what we're dealing with is the slow transition to Agenda 2030, a totalitarian, technocratic, global track and trace surveillance, 17 sustainable development goals that can't be achieved without every human being on planet Earth having some kind of digital ID attached to them. The EU is implementing it. When I call the EU the Fourth Reich, I am not, that is not something I'm saying with like a wink and a nod. I think it's very obvious that that is what the EU is. And they have captured all 27 nations in the EU, and they have no sovereignty. And we're on our way there if we don't wake up.
Well, let me pause you there because that's an interesting insight that I definitely want to get to. Like I said, I agree with you. I think this goes way, way, way back. But let's just go to World War II because I think a lot of us have maybe grandparents or parents who certainly were alive when it happened. So it's perhaps the most recent major event. And you spoke about Operation Paperclip and some of the precursors. I don't know if you've read this book from Dean Reuter, The Hidden Nazi, about Hans Kammler and how this was really the tip of the Operation Paperclip spear, where Werner von Braun and various Nazi technologies were laundered into American society. For instance, this book cites General Electric going over there and getting the jet engines. And I just wonder how many of these technologies that, I mean, at the time, I guess, I don't know, this is a very thorny subject because you could see how someone might say, well, radio technologies, radar technologies, splitting the atom, jet engines, these are things we can't allow to fall into the hands of our enemies. So let's seize these technologies. But that's that whole, to fight a demon, you can't become a demon. Where does evil stop and good begin? And we see this now with the FBI. They do these sting operations, whether it's trying to convince some pothead playing World of Warcraft that he should kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, or where does law enforcement end and law breaking begin?
Right. And I think that goes to the dictatorship by bureaucracy and the plans where nobody's guilty. If you're pointing in all different directions and one guy, this goes kind of back to the Eichmann in Jerusalem, banality of evil. If we have, they purposely, I think, siloed so many different pieces that have all worked in tandem, but you can't really point to one, because my belief at this point is not only that what you're saying, you have to remember, also is ascribed to COVID. So COVID, the whole excuse to me, the NIH, CIA, Department of Defense, USAID, the universities that worked with the COVID lab in Wuhan, to me, they're telling us that those are our biggest adversaries. Yet you're telling me that we, the people of the United States, are paying for you to work on, SARS-CoV-2 and all these bioweapons and stuff with the Chinese Communist Party in China, because if we don't, then they'll make them and we won't be in control of it. This is like bringing over the Nazis into the Jet Propulsion Lab and the Manhattan Project and, NASA and all of that, because if we didn't take the Nazis, well, then, they would have, Russia. But the bottom line is, it is us, and it's really important to understand. And Grassley, right now, after Millet won, Grassley wrote a letter to Millet because a lot of the Nazi money and rat lines and trafficking of people into our country with new identities went through from Germany, I believe through Switzerland, but then through the Vatican Bank, the City of London, through Argentina, because Perón was a fan of the Nazi Party, and into America. And so when we talk about Operation Paperclip, the next thing we have to talk about is the importation of the behavioral sciences from Nazi Germany, the importation of the propagandist machine from Nazi Germany, and most important, the importation of MK Ultra and behavioral sciences, sociology. We didn't have these majors in the universities before this time. Now they become whole departments, and a lot of that was created to manipulate the masses. And I don't think it ever stopped. The hearings were ridiculous because they weren't pointing to modern day warfare. And then you and I both know, obviously, Colonel Aquino, somehow a Satanist that went to Himmler's castle to summon black, magic or whatever. He wrote the U.S. Army's documents for mind war, psychological warfare in the 60s. And I believe that that psychological warfare has been played out against the American people over decades through Hollywood, through the media, and essentially through our education system to collapse our country from within and turn our country against itself. And these explanations have to be looked at and put in front of the American people without fear. My first book, Americans Anonymous, is a recovery program for the American citizens to accept. Maybe our country is as sick of as its secrets, and maybe it's time for us to put those secrets out there wherever they may lead, but to empower the American people to understand why and how this happened, so that maybe we can change it.
Yeah, I mean, the Michael Aquino story is it's one of those stories that if you told a person who's not entrenched in this world, they would laugh you off because it is so ridiculous. It's almost impossible to presume that it's true. Now, so you mentioned the behavioral sciences and things like that. Again, I'm fascinated by Operation Paperclip because it's another one of these things that when you tell people, they're like, oh yeah, right, Nazis. They don't even understand it. And one of the things that I found out about was, this University
yes.
of Louisville twin study. This is basically, I've spoken to people who are twins who were involved in this. Now, they're not doing any of the, chopping a leg off of one and
Right.
putting it on the other kind of stuff, but they did continue a bunch of twin, research that was essentially the Nazis were super fascinated by twins. And I don't know if you knew this. I didn't know about this until pretty recently, but the Louisville twin study was founded in 1957 by Frank Faulkner, Herr Faulkner. And I just wonder, who is this guy? Where did this come from? Are there elements of Operation? Everybody knows Werner von Braun was getting down with Walt Disney, making lots of cool animations about going to the moon. But where did the rest of these Nazis go? They tell us it was 1,600 approximately. But we only know the names of 30 some odd. Who are all these other 1,600? Is it only 1,600? What happened to their children? Their grandchildren? What's going on with all this?
Right, that's where we have to look. And this is why I brought up the Grassley Millet. So Grassley, after Millet won, wrote a letter to Millet saying that he wanted the documents of World War II rat lines that came through Nazi Germany into Argentina largely. We know that Eichmann was arrested in Argentina. Many people have also given proof that I believe is true that Mengele came through Argentina. But what has come out of the Grassley investigation is fascinating. It's looking like tens of thousands of people were relocated through these programs. And it wasn't just the person that they wanted to teach at Columbia or the person that they wanted to work at the Rockefeller Institute. It was their whole families were brought in and given new names and new identities. But the problem was the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany, which is the Nazis, the ideology came with them. And that ideology is not only what I believe we are dealing with in America right now. It wasn't supposed to end. It is totalitarianism with a bent of eugenics. And we are still dealing with that to this day. And eugenics did not come from Nazi Germany. It came from the Rockefellers in America to Nazi Germany. But what we have to understand is that the intimacy of these people, a lot of people don't know about the Gehlen organization. The Gehlen organization was run by Reinhard Gehlen, who was essentially Hitler's head of Hitler's FBI. The Nazi, essentially secret intelligence. Well, Alan Dulles recruited him and his entire team to join the CIA. I mean, so how many people came from the Gehlen group that were in intelligence in Nazi Germany into the CIA and left where they were running West Germany under the guise of, the Allies somehow? Where did they go? And I believe that they rose. There are groups in Germany right now, like the Rosa Luxemburg Society, that is funded by the German government, that is giving money to the DSA in New York. And I'm pretty sure that that is the rebirth. And like I show in the book, the Red House papers are real. I have found that that is not just reported in the CIA, it's reported all over the world. And that these international bankers, international lawyers, and architects exfiltrated as much money as they could out of Nazi Germany in tandem with the international banks and Argentina and the City of London and Wall Street before Hitler surrendered. So they did that under the guise of, we'll let Germany fail, but the Nazis will rise again. And I think that it's the caricature that Hollywood and elsewhere has created of the Nazis that leaves out that they are the National Socialist Workers' Party. Stalin and Lenin were socialist Democrats. All because they, switched the name doesn't mean that the Democrat socialists are not the same exact thing, and they are. Yeah. So that's where we are. They rebirthed themselves. But the Grassley thing is very interesting because if you look at it, it's been going on for 2 years. 100,000 new documents have come to light. Dozens of bank accounts have come to light. And what they say is that when this report is finally delivered, this is on Grassley's own website, in some point in 2026, that the whole understanding of World War II and the post-World War II world will be turned upside down. So to me, what I believe is a lot of these people came in to the NGOs that we are still fighting today. Like if you look back at the Rockefeller foundations and all of the tentacles, or the Ford Foundation even more, but Carnegie and MacArthur, a lot of these, I believe, behavioral scientists from Nazi Germany and propagandists and, all of them, the radio people, the newspaper people from Nazi Germany, I think came into these NGOs, came into these think tanks, came into our universities with cleaned out backgrounds that don't point to them being high-level Nazis. And when we say Nazis, again, stop talking about jackboot wearing, green men following Hitler. We're talking about totalitarian socialists.
Yeah, I mean, the NGOs, I agree completely, are a huge problem. You mentioned earlier the Brookings Institution, and I think this is a network. It's like the internet, yes. These things, they're all connected in one way or another. They have little offshoots. The Brookings Institution has a related organization called the Lawfare Institute that right. Ben Wittes is one of the founders of. So, I mean, I share what I understand to be your positive outlook and hope. But at the same time, I have to ask, why has Donald Trump not indicted Norm Eisen? It would seem to be so easy to do. You go through any of the 990s of any of the, defending democracy action. They're commingling 501c3 and 501c4 in a way that seems quite clearly illegal, certainly if they could get Trump into court over some, claim on a mortgage or a tax document 20 years ago. you could at least get Norm into court over this. I think he was setting up Michael Cohen to say and do things to entrap Trump. Why haven't we seen this happen yet, Mel?
This is the most disturbing part of watching all of this, particularly Pam Bondi. I thought that the first indictment should have been Mark Elias and Norm Eisen, because all roads lead to them. But what's worse about that is looking into Norm Eisen's activity when he was Obama's ambassador and he was in Prague, because something was going on in Prague to globalize law. And don't forget, Norm Eisen graduated with Barack Obama from Harvard Law in 1991, around the same time that they're good. Well, at least Barack Obama's pal from Saudi Arabia, Alaweed, is donating money to Harvard Law and to Georgetown Law. Essentially, they and remember, Norm Eisen's first job was at the inversion known as the ADL. And, a weaponized operation under the guise of protecting from anti-Semitism, where it's done exactly the opposite. But again, Norm Eisen, to me, it's what he was doing when he was the ambassador in Prague that is the most disturbing, because I think that they were pushing towards not just a global governance model, but a global law and order, a global judicial model that would replace our country's judicial system. These people are all involved with the Brennan Center and the Vera Institute of Justice and all these BS groups at NYU Law, Columbia Law, Berkeley Law, Georgetown Law. And the bottom line is they're not practicing constitutional law anymore. They are essentially practicing what I call critical legal theory. And if you look back to those years when Obama and Eisen were at Harvard Law School, or at Bernardine Dohrn becoming a noted and famous law professor, you see that critical legal theory has slowly but surely replaced constitutional law. And to me, that is such a betrayal of our country and we the people and the founders. I can't even believe that it's gone on this long, but all roads lead to Brookings, and there's no doubt. And then if you look into that hub at Harvard, the one that you brought up before, the D3P, it's run by Robbie Mook, right after Trump wins. So, and all these same people, it's a network. I've lined it up, and I can show you all of the things. You go and you look at the Boston FBI field office simulation of January 6th, Event 201. Everyone at the Transition Integrity Project should be under investigation. And then the worst of the worst is West Exec Advisors. Anthony Blinken wasn't only running that, but that was a shadow foreign policy while they kept Trump in lawfare between 2016 and 2020, continuing Obama-Brzezinski's march to World War III. And I believe that World War III using Ukraine was set up before the fall of the USSR for a third try to unify Europe, collapse Russia, suck it into the EU as one united Europe, and essentially run the world, Agenda 2030 out of there. And Agenda 2030, I believe, was created to be the solution to World War III's reconstruction. If you look at all the money and all the meetings and the COP conferences, and it's all connected and it's all overlap of the same people. And there's not a lot of them. I would say that we're talking about probably 5,000 people that have been plotting and moving this along through different nodes in tandem at the same time. And like I said, I believe that since 2016, that node is Harvard University's Balfour Center.
And you just brought up another really important subject, Ukraine. It really seems like Trump could have, during that first meeting where J.D. Vance threw him out of the Oval Office or whatever with Zelensky. Why couldn't Trump just say, listen, Zelensky, here's the deal. We're having an election in 90 days, and the United States, the United Nations, and Russia are going to oversee the election in Ukraine. And unless you get reelected, you're out. No more money, no more missiles. It seems like Donald Trump and whatever it is, whether it's Epstein or something else, Donald Trump appears to be captured by this system that you're talking about. And when I see things happening, look, we got to be fair. When I see things happening like Donald Trump Jr. going into 1789 Capitol, Eric Trump being in these drone companies that are getting all kinds of contracts, maybe it's not exactly as bad as Hunter Biden, but it does have the whiff of presidential family corruption, and why are we seeing that? A lot of people think perhaps Trump is captured. These things are being done so that it's like a carrot and a stick, or almost like when you join a gang and they get you on video killing somebody. So if you turn against us, we're turning you in, and
Yeah.
keep the war in Ukraine going, get the war in Iran started, do what we want. We seem to be marching toward this abyss no matter what happens. And to go back to our start, JFK clearly was calling this thing out,
Yep.
and they shot him in the head. Trump,
Yes.
Butler, I don't know, we could probably do a whole other show about that. But I mean, is there a way for us to escape this, and will Trump do it? I know you can't know, but
I don't see why he's not doing it, first of all. Second of all, I do not know why we have not pulled out of NATO. NATO is a total fraud. There was lots of Nazis involved in NATO. Everyone should know that. John Foster Dulles wrote the UN treaty while he was not only, going into the Secretary of State, but also on the Rockefeller Foundation board. I don't know, but I do know that Norm Eisen and all of his friends, Mary McCord, Wittes, all these people, they are ready to not only impeach Donald Trump after the midterms, they are going to go after his children and all of everyone in the internal, Trump administration a second time. All of us again, shut us up, because when they turned the playbook against the United States in 2016, I mean, I hope people understand the CIA wrote a letter to General Flynn. It was actually through their Steady State NGO, which is a bunch of CIA people that overthrew and ran the EU project and turned that playbook that Norm Eisen, claims Gene Sharp inspired him to do. It goes back to his time in Prague. They wrote a letter to General Flynn that Donald Trump could not be president in 2016, that he could not be put in office. And they don't hide it. And they say it. Steve Cash says it on his podcast that 150 former CIA operatives essentially saw what Trump as a threat to what they were doing in Ukraine. Well, what were they doing in Ukraine? What were they protecting in Ukraine? If Victoria Nuland testified that the United States not only put in 12 CIA installations after 2014, promoting that coup with NATO, but then the United States went into their judiciary, their banking sector, their oil and gas sector, their policing, their everything. Ukraine is not a democracy. It has been completely captured. And the reason I think that this is being stopped is either there's some kind of immunity, or worse, trillions of dollars have been invested in the World War III Agenda 2030 model, and much of that construction is in Ukraine and has been going on in Ukraine. FTX was involved in Ukraine. Track and trace surveillance, testing. Eric Schmidt brags about, who's as dangerous to me as Bill Gates, brags about testing all of the drones and the future technology of robotic war in Ukraine. What is Ukraine really should be the question, because it's certainly not a democracy that we are defending. And something was worth it enough that between 2016 and 2024, they could not allow Donald Trump to have detente with Russia or Ukraine. And West Exec Advisors appears to be continuing down the path of preparing for World War III while Donald Trump's pulling out of all of the things. So right now we're in that same odd like schizophrenic moment where it's like, okay, we're pulling out of all the globalist operations. We are doing all this and that, but we're still allowing them to drag us into World War III by triggering NATO's Article 5. That's why I think Ratcliffe went there. But the other big part is they had us all focusing on Russia when the intelligence agencies and everyone knew that the breach was by China. So all of this lines up to something is afoot that we don't know about. And I am looking very forward to seeing what happens when Donald Trump finally does sit down, hopefully behind closed doors, with Xi, because I believe Xi and Putin and Modi and all these people are fully aware of the color revolution and regime change operation that has been taking place on U.S. soil from 2016 to this day. So for me, I'm just hoping that there's something we don't know that is afoot. But what is really going on too, and the American people have to understand, is BlackRock and Chase and all these same, because BlackRock's history is very sketchy. Fink's history is sketchy all the way back to the time period I'm talking about, 44 to 54. The Wall Street lawyers that reconfigured our country, we got to remember it was Wall Street lawyers and multinational corporation representatives that the Dulles brothers were. That model is still continuing. So whatever is going on in Ukraine and also I believe in Israel and Iran and I don't think it has anything to do with those countries. I think that it has to do with protecting the supranational, endless continuity above our nations. And never forget that the CIA did these coups in Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, and many of the countries that right now people are pointing at legitimately are pieces of that supranational endless war for profit architecture. And to me, I think that they're going after the nodes, but in the meantime, you are absolutely right. And it is upsetting many people watching the Trump family get involved and get contracts essentially from the government. Even worse, for me, seeing Donald Trump sitting side by side with Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates at a dinner at the White House as if they didn't completely coordinate and fund the overthrow of his total administration in 2020 is also shocking. That none of the people that were involved, none of the 51 intelligence agents that conspired to defraud
Nothing
the people
happened to
that
them.
nothing. They conspired to defraud the people of the United States openly before an election, and none of them have been indicted. And in fact, most of them are now working at the Carnegie Institute or Atlantic Council or the CFR or Rockefeller, one of their NGOs. Those 51 should have been indicted day one, in my opinion.
And I think you're right. That's what they're going to do when they get back in it,
Oh yeah,
I don't even want to
it's
say
planned
when.
already.
But I mean, I think what you just hit on, these, Ukraine, Iran, these are flashpoints for World War III, aren't they? And you mentioned
Yes.
this briefly, but what is it that you think Ratcliffe was doing in Russia on this very unusual mission?
Well, my thought is NATO is no longer our ally if they ever were. But the bottom line is the UK is not our ally. The EU is not our ally. You want to know why? Because all of them were involved in the global coup to overthrow Donald Trump in 2016 through 2020. So all of them were involved. You can't discount Dear Love working with Gina Haspel and Kohler from the FBI and CIA in London, working with Chris Steele, working with uh, all of the agency there in tandem with Brennan and Clapper and Comey in America and the Five Eyes nations, all involved in the regime change operation to destroy Donald Trump and his entire voting base, 2016, actually to date. So to me, we are dealing with a global coup against the United States that is ongoing. And I think what's going on right now out of Romania and out of Germany is they are pushing Russia. Something is going on where our supposed NATO allies, who are not our allies and hate Donald Trump and want to get back to Agenda 2030, particularly the fraud that is Mark Carney. What I think is going on is Ratcliffe probably went over there to share some of the stuff that they're finding out about the pullout of Afghanistan that hasn't been put out yet, leaving our Bagram Air Force Base to China, leaving all those weapons there for World War III. I think it's a lot more connected to this long planned, I believe, since the 90s, Third World War on the continent of Europe, destroying Russia, taking all their natural resources, and running the world through Geneva, Brussels, and the international banks. And that's where I think they are especially in the EU. They are pushing, and I think that they are trying to get Article 5 of NATO triggered so that the United States comes in yet again with our blood and our money and fights a battle that should never have been ours. And that is where we are. I don't understand how we are dealing still in NATO. It is a total, complete, and not only a money laundering operation, but it is the hub of the endless war for profit and reconstruction to consolidate power on a global scale. And it's going. So I think Ratcliffe went there, obviously, to share some new things that they found about not just, and don't forget about Russia and Afghanistan before us in Afghanistan and Brzezinski's entire grand chessboard. I mean, it's all being flipped over. And the bottom line is, I think they used Russia to distract us from China and the real plan, which is China to be the top of the technocracy of global control through the global public infrastructure already built by the tech bros and funded, I think, by largely by BlackRock and their subsidiaries and their partners. And right now, they're waiting out Trump, and the minute that they can, they will re advance right in front of our faces to Agenda 2030 and collapse the constitutional republic. And I think Ratcliffe and all of them know that, but they cannot allow us to be triggered into a NATO operation, or it will be it will be a worse disaster, I think, than when they triggered, I believe, and released COVID.
So you think maybe Ratcliffe was over there saying, hey, one of these dumb little Eastern European countries is going to try to provoke you to bomb them.
Yes.
Don't fall for it. We are,
Yes.
Yeah, it makes sense. And that certainly could be it. I'm telling you, Mel, we could talk for days and days on end. I know you're very busy.
Yeah.
People can follow you on X at Mel K Show. You
Yes.
are on Rumble. But aren't you on YouTube also, but not the original Mel K Show?
No, the original Mel K show never came back, and and you know how hard it is to build on Rumble,
Yeah.
especially if you don't have a deal with them. So, my whole thing is now I tried a new YouTube with just clips and stuff, just putting my foot in because I built that to well over 100,000 subs within a very short period of time. And me and Dr. Zelenko did a couple shows during COVID, and I didn't know at the time. I am sure you didn't either because you got kicked off. We watched you all the time. And suddenly they kicked us off. I don't think YouTube or Google are American allies. And I think Google is very much involved in the coup against the United States. So
100%.
for me to go rebuild YouTube right now, the EU, if people don't know, they are putting through Agenda 2030 through many different nodes, and how that's not going to affect the United States, I don't understand. But the EU is hell-bent. I think the EU is broke. I think they made a lot of bad choices, and I think they are captured by the international financial endless war for profit model, and they're going to push to get World War III kinetic and drag us into it if we don't do something quick. And I think it should be pulling out of NATO. It'll, the 51 intelligence agents will lose their minds, but I think that really should be something the American people need to understand, that if that happens, it's going to be a destruction similar, I think, to COVID.
Yeah. And, just to touch on what you were saying, I don't know if you knew this, but just last September, Google was dragged into Congress, and they did create a framework where, after years and years of legal battles, I was able to get the Jason Goodman channel back. It had 120,000 subscribers, but since April, it's fallen to 113,000. Even with that number, Mel, and the people who know who you are, forget people who, maybe they hate me. We have only 54 people watching this broadcast live. In 2020, if you and I did a broadcast like this on this channel, there would be 4,000 live viewers, 10,000 views in an hour, 100,000 overnight. And I think, along the lines of exactly what you're saying, they realized, okay, if we just throw these people off, then they're going to yell and scream. Let's reinstate Jason, but let's put the do not publish sticker on
That's
here.
happening to
Nobody
most
sees
of
it.
the people that got kicked off when we both got kicked off. That's happening to most of the people, but I'm telling you, it's not over. YouTube and Google are totally aligned with the globalist takeover of the United States.
I agree.
And we have and Microsoft. And we have to understand, and I'm sure you and I have all of our devices, they're still watching us. And I know that when I go on YouTube, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be suppressed. But you know what? Keep showing up. But
You gotta keep
rebuilding
doing
there is something I'm not really counting on, because I think they're going to pull the carpet again. They
I
really
agree.
need World War III.
No, you're 100% right. But in the meantime, people can go to themelkshow.com. You've got all the links to all of your social media platforms up there. People can purchase your books, watch your videos, engage with you. I think you and I need to have more conversations in the future. I'm so glad we met finally. Actually, I just learned that we are mutual alums of NYU. We were there at the same time. I don't know how I didn't meet you. That was so strange. It's a big place.
We might have.
Maybe,
Who
you're
knows?
right.
I mean, whoever thought you and I would be doing this with our,
Right.
our
Yeah, I was
lives?
making Spider-Man movies until 10 years
Right,
ago.
right. I know. I got it.
But I
Well,
really
this
appreciate
will
you
be the
coming on.
beginning then.
Yeah,
This will
yeah.
be the beginning. You'll come on my show too,
That
hopefully.
would be great. And I want to make sure
Great.
people know that they can purchase the book right now, Infiltration Instead of Invasion. Get the book. It's packed
Thank
with
you.
information. If your head didn't explode from listening to this, then I don't know what's up with you. Mel K, thank you so much for joining me. And thanks for
Thank you.
watching, everybody. Don't forget, you can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by going to crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com.